Good afternoon, everybody. I'm John Steger with Cintrifuse. Thank you for joining us today. This will be our last event of the year, so we're finally going to get to put 2020 to bed. Please forgive my festive wear. Without an actual in-person holiday party this year, I have any excuse I can to break out the holiday-themed clothing. I'm really excited to introduce this session today. So, Jason Dichter is joining us as a special guest from the city of brotherly love. I have had the good fortune to know Jason for a good number of years and the chance to work with him at two different companies. Um, Jason has 20 plus, and I won't embarrass him by telling you how many, 20 plus years selling for tech startups. And as we all know, it can be hard to sell to the enterprise in a startup role. Jason has done it very successfully the whole time, not by pushing or trickery or being flashy, but by being really good at the craft. So I think he has a lot of terrific lessons to share. I've certainly learned a lot with him over the years, and really excited to have him here. So we will do Q&A engagement, probably via chat. If I need to unmute people, I'll figure out how to do that. But in the meantime, and any questions, please throw them in. We'll try and keep this as interactive as possible. So, Jason, over to you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, John. Really appreciate it. Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. As John said, I've been basically
And
working.
Your video's off.
Oh, my apologies. There we go. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I've been working at startups for 20 plus years. As John pointed out, I've had 3 exits, and I love to sort of geek out over selling. I love memes. So I don't know if you've ever seen this meme before. What makes it funny is, well, if I start looking like Charlie here on the right side, please stop me, John. What's funny about this meme especially is the original meme is about being vegan. So what I think I look like when I'm talking about being vegan. So feel free to share this with Lynn. Anyway, so let's start off with some trivia. Maybe you guys can just chat me some answers. Does anybody recognize what movie this is? Anybody at all? Let's see here. Glengarry, exactly. Anybody recognize who the actor is? Yep, Alec Baldwin. Do you know what he's holding? He is holding a set of steak knives, but he's actually holding second place, if you remember the movie, right? Does anybody remember what first place was? Yes, exactly. And El Dorado. And he was famous. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend watching this movie. It's a really interesting take on hardcore selling. That is not the type of selling I've done my entire career, but it's an interesting take on the movie. He's made famous a quote from there, the ABCs of selling, the ABC standing for always be closing. Okay, thanks for humoring me. As I said, I've had 3 exits. Just a brief background on me. I worked at various startup companies. Bluestone Software was one of a handful of companies in the Philly area to go public in '99. And we IPO'd September of '99. It was amazing. I was in my 20s. I had no idea what we were doing and how amazing it was. And a year later, we got bought by Hewlett Packard. That's like hitting a home run and a grand slam in the same inning. Targus Info was the next company I went to. I led sales teams there, opened verticals, started in '01 and was there for 9 or 10 years or so. was acquired by Newstar for $650 million. If just adding those two up, I've had $1 billion worth of exits. Unfortunately, not all that money came to me, but quite proud of that. And then John and I started working together at Wilkie Global. They were acquired in May of 18. Wilkie was a private company, so I don't have the details on the numbers there, but um, they made sure key employees like John and myself had golden handcuffs to stick around. That was fun. And I currently work at Zendesk. I'm the principal on the BPO side. I run the BPO channel here in Amer. We just hit $1 billion in ARR in the third quarter, and we're growing. One of the things that attracted me, uh, to Zendesk is the partner channel is brand new. It's only a few years old. It's like a startup within a large company. And to me, I'm super attracted to startups. That's just how I'm built. This should not be news to you guys. Working in a startup is really difficult. This is a great quote from The Road Less Traveled. If you've never read that book, it's an interesting book. Once you realize life's difficult, it becomes no longer sort of difficult. Um, you know, Working in a startup, if it was easy, everyone would do it. Now, one of the hard challenges you have is no enterprise knows who you are, right? So as a startup, they've never heard of your company. And for me, I always liked the challenge of trying to get an enterprise organization to know who we were. Uh, my thought was early on in my career, I could take a chance and work at a startup. If it didn't work out, I could always go get a sales job. But to me, I really wanted to move the needle and sell things that haven't been sold. And so that's what always attracted me to startups. But again, life in a startup's difficult. And here's a phrase we use at Targus Info a lot. Oftentimes you have to plow the dirt with your face, especially when you're trying to sell something that's never been sold before, right? I guarantee you're sitting there saying, hey, I have a brand new product or service that's never been sold before. How do you sell it, right? How do you price it? How do you figure out how we're going to go to market with that? It's really hard. The more repeatable your sales are, the more you sell, the more you grow, the easier it is, the less plowing the dirt with your face you do. Couple things up front. I mean, at the end of the day, there are golden rules, right? Do unto others is a golden rule. I'm not saying it's not. But in the startup world, what I've learned is whoever has the gold sort of makes the rules, right? And money covers a lot of warts. What I learned along the way was sales is king in an organization because most startups, every startup I've ever worked in, I'm sure you're the same, is funded by somebody else and they want a return on that money. And so as long as you're selling, they're getting a return and life is easy and they're not pressuring you for various things. If you're not selling, life is hard. Money covers a lot of warts. I hope that resonates and makes sense with you guys. So a lot of times in selling, you have to sort of figure out, where are you? I don't know how many of you already have VP of sales and a sales team and a full structure, or if you're just a CEO and you're the one doing all the selling. The truth is even here at Zendesk, we put a lot of effort into people buying Zendesk off the web. We've been around since 2007. A lot of people know who we are. A lot of people know what we do. We still have 535 salespeople. There's a reason we have an army of salespeople. People don't just come and buy, right? So it takes effort. Now, conversely, selling one account or two accounts doesn't mean you have a business. It doesn't mean you have a repeatable, process. If you've ever watched Shark Tank, Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful, I've seen him tell people to their face, you have a nice hobby, but you don't have any sales or any customers. And he's cruel when he says it, but he's right. So even though you may have sold to one company, even a blind squirrel finds a nut every now and then. So every startup needs, or every new business needs, a lighthouse account. It's really important. You need it to be referenceable. You need it to put yourself on the map. You need it to be able to tell a really cool story. And if you don't have a lighthouse account, go find one and figure out how to either, you know, give it away or sell it in lieu of being a reference, but figure out a way to get somebody big who's recognizable, who you can tell a good story about, who has changed their business using your product or service. Awareness is really, really important. Also, don't be afraid to mess up early on. It's how you learn. It's how you learn in selling. I can recall many times we sold deals where we left a lot of money on the table, but at the time, we didn't know what people would really pay for. That's what happens very early on. It's okay. You'll get past it. The best salespeople I've ever met are maestros. They're true artists, but there is a science to selling. And the artists, the greatest ones, are doing the science part naturally. It's in their head. They know the 5 things you need to recognize whether or not there's a possible sale here. And a key takeaway I'd like to suggest is, and I'm a guy who's hired and fired very good salespeople along the way. The best salespeople that have done well at startups were people that were hungry, that were open to constant chaos and change, willing to plow the dirt with their face for the good of the organization. They weren't people that carried a $4 million quota at Oracle last year. And I don't mean to pick on Oracle, but the truth is when I call you and I'm from Oracle, you know what I'm here to sell you, or Salesforce, or any recognizable company. That's the easiest sales job in the world. Tons of resources, both money and technical people, etc. Working in a startup, you're wearing 50 hats at once. So I would hire people that have already worked successfully in startups before I would hire somebody who just made a great living at Salesforce. Anyway, those maestros and those artists know sort of, this is a really key slide. I've done a lot of sales training in my career. They seem to know in their mind these sort of 5 things needed for a sale. This is a really, really important slide. So as you know, in any sale, you have to establish a value proposition with the customer or the prospect, right? What is the need? And then through a series of questioning, you have to figure out, do they have the authority or the influence to actually buy this? Do they have the budget to buy this? Can we get the technical and legal check marks that, yeah, this can be sold to them? And then there has to be some level of urgency. I need to buy it before the end of the year for whatever reason. What's really critical about this slide is the arrow here that goes back from urgency to the value prop. I'm pretty sure everybody I know, including myself, has been involved in the middle of a sale, and the customer went quiet on you. They haven't returned a phone call in 2 weeks, and you're not really sure what happened. There was urgency early on. Perhaps something has changed. What you really need to do in that situation is get them on the phone, restate the value proposition that you agreed on in the first place, and see if something's changed. A lot of times I see a lot of new salespeople struggle in this area because they never fully established the value proposition to begin with. And so there really isn't a deal there. They think there's a deal there, but there's not. Recognizing where you are in a sale saves you the most precious asset you have, which is time. Every organization should follow some sort of methodology and stages, right? So, you know, the reality is whether you use Pipedrive or Salesforce or whatever tool that you're using, this is just a generic sort of, stage of sales that you should adopt it within your company. And the percentages are there to tell you what's the likelihood I'm going to have a sale here. So if a deal's qualified at 50%, I know I have three of those five factors satisfied. I've established a value prop, I have the budget, and technical has bought off on this. I just need to figure out, do they have the authority to do this? Who signs this? And what's the legal process? Okay, that deal's 50% coming in. Hopefully this makes sense. For every deal that you lose, especially early stage, you should absolutely do a postmortem with your salesperson, whether that's you or somebody on your team, and figure out which of those five steps did we miss? What did we do wrong? This is a really, really important point. It allows you to figure out how to forecast on time. I think you get it. It's really important to create stages in a sales environment and then pick a methodology, right? The flavor of the last few years has been MedPick. We use MedPick here at Zendesk. I'm old enough to remember spin selling, solution selling, you name it. I've had a lot of sales training over the years. They're all variations of the same things. I think this is really important. I have a friend who's the CEO of a startup, a cybersecurity startup in the DC area. He actually trains the entire company on MedPick, on their sales methodology, all the technical people, the admins, everyone. And the reason is he wants a common language across the company. He recognizes that sales is really important. He's told me funny anecdotal stories about how technical people are challenging salespeople that, hey, they're missing things, they're skipping steps. And that's just great. It's also been helpful in terms of you did a demo with a solutions consultant maybe, but for the next meeting, that person's sick and somebody has to step in, they'll know exactly what was covered and where because you're running the company using a sales methodology. Again, in my opinion, super, super, super important.
So, Jason, for
Yes.
MedPick, then, are these stages? Are these, I mean, is this essentially like an actual form? Things to sort of learn as you're engaging with prospective clients?
That the last one right there, right? So as you're going along, uh, what you do is in the middle of a deal, we call it, hey, let's med pick this deal. It's essentially trying to figure out what don't I know? So I've done these five things, or at least I think I've done these five things. What are the pieces that I'm potentially missing? Is our champion a champion? Does he or she have the power? Right? Who's the economic buyer? Who's paying for this? Have we properly identified the pain? How strong is that pain? Is it mild or is it really acute? So, a lot of times when you're in the middle of a specific deal that's stalled, right? Obviously, the smartest thing is to go back to the established value proposition and make sure that they buy off on that or ask, hey, has something changed? A real life example is, hey, when we first started talking, you said you needed to do blah, blah, blah by X, Y, and Z because of this reason. Has has that timetable shifted? And then you just don't say another word. They're going to tell you what's changed. And it could just be, no, I'm waiting for legal to sign the deal. Okay, great. Tell me about that process. And then you drill down on that. Or it's, yeah, actually, we've been working on this other project. It's taken a priority. We kind of backburnered you to the second half of next year. Sorry about that. Okay, that helps you forecast. This deal's not coming in until September, right? Med picking a deal is really, really important. Really important. Let's get into some specifics. So, you know, creating desire, especially in a startup, is really important. Again, enterprises haven't heard of your company. They've never bought from you. They don't read about you in the press. They don't know. They don't know you. So get a Lighthouse account, create a really compelling story. And the best salespeople, those maestros, they're just great storytellers. They're great storytellers. They're captivating. It paints a picture in the customer's mind. You have a Lighthouse account to be referenceable, you know, be credible when you're talking to them, obviously. And if you understand the vertical you're selling into, it's easy to sort of understand what their motivations are. Maybe they need to keep up with everybody else, that sort of thing. So why do people buy? You know, Books have been written on this. So I'm just going to round out a few of them here, right? Everybody talks about return on investment. I've worked at places where they had very sophisticated Excel spreadsheets where you had to plug in a bunch of numbers and figure out some type of ROI. Didn't sell very much in those places. The best ROIs I've ever done have been on the back of a napkin. Targus Info was a company that sold names and addresses that were appended to phone numbers. So on an inbound call to a call center, we could screen pop on the agent's desktop, John Steger, correctly spelled, 123 Main Street, Cincinnati, Ohio, right? And we shaved 10 seconds off their call, and the rep just had to verify John's name. They didn't have to say, how do you spell Steger? And we sold that 10 cents a drink. Most people historically bought files of the entire country. There were companies out there that scanned phone books and they'd give you a file of every name, address, and phone number linked together in one file, and you spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on it. Through the internet at Targus Info, we sold it by the drink. We were a business of pennies. It was simple back of the napkin math ROI. If I can save you 10 seconds a call and make your data more accurate because I'm giving you a mail deliverable address, is that worth 10 cents? Yes. Yes, it was. When we sold to Newstar, we were a $130 million company built on pennies. Pennies. Anyway, obviously people buy it because it solves a major problem they have. That's an obvious one. No company ever wants to be out. Hey, the bigger the problem, the better it is for you, because the more value you establish early, you can hold your price points high. I'll talk more about that later. No company ever wants to be out of compliance, whether that's GDPR, whatever the compliance is. No company ever wants to be caught with their pants down. If they're out of compliance, and they feel that you can fix that for them, they'll buy quickly. The next two are sort of intertwined. While John and I were at Wilkie Global, we had a very large pharmaceutical client who was a client for a number of years. A new person came into the department and she wanted to make a mark and leave a legacy. And she ripped us out and she put in a competitor. So she could pad her resume, be viewed as a thought leader and a visionary. And she's since moved on to greater things. That really hurt because we lost the deal there. That's a negative spin on this. But the truth is people want to leave a mark and people want a legacy. So if you have some really cool cutting edge tech or some really cool cutting edge services, um, play to this. This is a key reason why people buy. Be like the cool kids. You're familiar with the term FOMO, fear of missing out. A lot of people have FOMO. If you're the hot tool, people want meetings with you and they want to figure out, hey, let's buy this. Let's be cool like everybody else. How did Salesforce build its reputation? They were anti-Oracle, right? They were the cool kids. And then lastly, relationships are so paramount. Selling is a transference of trust. That's an old school sales term. But the truth is relationships happen organically. The best relationships in my life happen organically. My wife, my best friends. You can't force that. But if you can build a relationship, it's really, really important. In fact, John's cultivated such a good relationship with me. I'm here speaking today for free. So Let's go over some common pitfalls of salespeople. If you're in your company and you're selling yourself, you may fall into some of these. I don't know if anybody's old enough to remember Atari, and they had a game called Pitfall, and so I figured I'd throw this in here. John's old enough to remember this at least. When you're prospecting, this is a made up word that we made up at Targus Info. I still to this day ask before I send every email to a customer or prospect, is this compellent? And what I mean by that is, oh, it was in television. Sorry, not Atari. It was in television. My bad. And what I mean by compellent is I ask myself before I hit send, is what I've written here compelling and is it relevant to their business? Otherwise, you're a pest. Or another thing to just ask yourself is what's in it for them? I watch a lot of salespeople write one-sided emails and they can't understand why they're not responding. The truth is it's not compelling or relevant to them. And I'm not talking about lengthy, long-winded prospecting, 3 bullet points, referencing somebody similar to them. If I was prospecting Revlon, I might talk about the success I've had with Estee Lauder and L'Oreal. That should be compelling and relevant enough. And hey, I just want to have 20 minutes of your time to see if we can have the same effects with Revlon. That should be compelling enough for somebody to write you back and say, yeah, let's talk. Ask yourself every time you send an email, is this compelling to them and is it relevant? Really, really good prospecting tip. This is a big one. I see this one a lot, right? Show up and throw up. I've had reps on my team go, oh, we had the greatest meeting. We talked about everything we do, and they ate it up. And I'd say, hey, that's fantastic. Did you tell them everything they needed to know? And they'd say, and then some. And then I'd say, did you actually learn anything about them? And that's when they kind of look away. The truth is, you can't listen while you're talking. It's impossible. And the best advice I can give to any salesperson is ask a lot of questions and then just shut up and listen. Just listen. They're going to tell you what they want. But I've seen a lot of salespeople show up with lots of features and great benefits and think it was a great meeting. If you didn't hear from them, it wasn't. This is some of my favorite things, right? So early on, I use Mom, Where Do Babies Come From as the example. I learned this from a senior sales guy when I was really young, when I was at Bluestone. The hospital is a perfectly fine example to answer to this question, right? You're not going to explain to a 5-year-old the ins and outs of where babies actually come from. They're going to, run to the hills scared. Same with a prospect. So, try not to, you don't have to give every ounce of every answer to every question. Answer the question, but do it in a way where you're advancing the sale. Know where you are in the process. Another variation of this is John and I used to work for Mike Wilkie, who's a great guy, great business he built. Mike was the kind of guy where you'd say, "Hey, Mike, what time is it?" And he would tell you how to build a watch. And we all talked about it. That's just the way he was. And the reality is I just wanted to know that it was 4:30 or whatever time it was. So know your audience. Look, if they're asking you a question, it gives you carte blanche to ask questions back. And again, the whole point of asking questions back is to help advance a sale, to find out those 5 key things and or any other med pick answers you need to know. A lot of times, you need to qualify or disqualify, get to know fast, right? So ask questions, listen, challenge them a bit. It's okay. It's an open two-way dialogue. I had a rep on my team. We were trying to sell Wegmans. This is at Targus Info. We were trying to sell Wegmans Supermarkets, which is a chain based in Rochester. I live outside of Philly. It's the day we were supposed to go up there and meet with them. We were going to sell them names and addresses that they could use at the point of sale in the store. So the thought was, instead of, you know how like you have a loyalty card at a grocery store, you put in your phone number, they know it's you. We were trying to sell them that concept with an actual name and address so they could send, coupons out and other things. It was a more advanced version of just put your phone number in. And so my rep tees it up. He asks all the right relevant questions. We're supposed to go to Rochester. It snows 6 inches that day. Flights get canceled. He says, I have a Jeep. Let's drive. We drive 6 hours to Rochester. We're sitting down with Wegmans. The meeting's going swimmingly well. This is a great idea. You guys have the best data. Where does it come from? They're asking us all the typical questions. They're eating up the answers. And then finally, one guy in the corner says, well, how would this actually work? And we said, well, somebody would input their phone number and we would give back to the computer or the register, the person's name and address. And that guy says, we don't have any computers in the stores. And I look at my rep and he looks at me and we go, well, how's it work today? And they said, well, they put a phone number in and it just says yes or no, this is a loyalty customer. And I looked at my rep and I thought, that was a very long drive home in snow because we had nothing to sell them. Get to know as fast as you can, right? Is there an established value proposition? If there's not, move on. I watch a lot of startups go down roads they shouldn't be going down. So don't waste your time. Handling objections is a big thing, right? This happens in every sale. You should just embrace it and know that there's going to be objections. You should absolutely answer the question. I watch politicians mess up at this all the time. They don't answer the questions. They just move on to something else. And it leaves a lot of fear and doubt and other things in people's minds. Answer your objections. In fact, write down sort of an FAQ. You know the questions people ask you all the time. Who else uses this? How do you differentiate between your competitors? Why should I buy from you? Obviously, reference clients, do what you need to do to advance a sale. The two most important sales words for any startup are normally and typically. And here's why. People have never bought your product or service before. So they're skeptical. They've never heard of your company. So when you start talking to them and say, well, normally what we sell is a base package, it's $60K a year or it's $5K a month. And here's what you get for that. That's the normal package we sell, but based on your needs, you're going to need to do double that. Or typically the best way to get engaged with us is we do a 3-month pilot and then we bring in our success team and they'll take you home to the point you're trying to get to. Normally and typically are the two most important sales words ever. If you're selling something that's never been sold before, and even if you are selling stuff that's been sold before, people just don't know how to buy. And no one's going to say to you, how do I buy this? Right? Sometimes I've actually heard that. How do I buy this? Perfect. Well, normally, typically, John's heard me say these two phrases 1,000 times. It disarms people. I'm hoping that makes sense with you guys. How do you answer questions about price? Always comes up, right? Price before value closes doors. Price before value is a race to the bottom. They're going to think, how cheap can I get this? But when you differentiate value before price, you get a premium. So demonstrate your value before you give price every time. I said this yesterday, 2 different times to 2 sales reps here. Hey, are we talking to the monkey or the organ grinder? I know this dates me. The truth here is you need the monkey or there's no show. So you got to find out what's in it for the monkey. But I watch a lot of young salespeople who aren't as experienced negotiate with the monkey, not the organ grinder. At the end of the day, it's the organ grinder who's going to sign the deal, not the monkey. It's okay to ask the monkey for a referral to that person if they're stalling or they can't get the deal done or you suspect they can't get the deal done. It's okay to ask for that. Just don't upset the monkey because you need him for the show. Happy years. Holy cow. I've had a lot of reps over the years come back and tell me, oh my God, they're going to buy everything and they're going to buy in the next month. The biggest thing that they really miss is they think they heard the prospect say something when in fact it was them who showed up and threw it up, right? They said it. So the best thing you can do is listen closely and challenge and get rid of those happy years. A lot of salespeople have happy years. Everybody likes to think very positively. It kills deals. Lastly, time is the enemy of all deals. These are the pitfalls, right? I have horror story after horror story on this. For example, a dear friend of mine was selling $1 million deal to the US Postal Service, worked all year on the deal. Every month he would get up in his pipeline and talk about this deal with the Postal Service. When's it coming in? When's it coming in? He finally closed the deal on the last Friday in the month of August. The last Friday he closes the deal. It's $1 million deal. On Monday, he comes into the office. He calls the guy who signed it, and the phone rings and rings and rings and rings and rings and rings. Till finally it goes out to a receptionist, and he says, "Yeah, I'm trying to reach Doug. Did his number change?" And she said, "Hold on a minute." Puts him on hold for about 5 minutes, and comes back and says, "I'm sorry to tell you this, but Doug passed away over the weekend." It's a true story. He went to a barbecue and he had a heart attack and died at the barbecue. That so now my friend's like, who's taken over for him? And he's trying not to be callous. And they're like, we don't know. We'll get back to you. 6 months later, they outsource the entire thing to Convergys. Deal just literally died. Time is the enemy of all deals. Creating urgency is really important. When people want to buy from you and they want to get started by January 31st, you can start to set fuses, right? Meaning, okay, let's work backwards then. We're going to need a signed contract by December 31st because it's going to take us 3 weeks to implement blah, 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 blah. So is that the same timetable that you're on? Because you said you got to be live on the 31st. You're just creating urgency and you're setting a fuse at every stage. It's the best way to get deals in on time. Yeah, that's the best way to do it. I'd be remiss if I didn't throw in a shameless plug for partners. So let's talk about that. I'm guessing as a startup, you can't afford to hire an army of salespeople the way, Zendesk has, 530 salespeople. But we just hit $1 billion and we can afford to do that. So the truth is, I learned this early on, and this is why my career took the route as a partner salesperson. I learned that, hey, we're not going to hire an army of salespeople, but how do I easily get at the enterprise who has those relationships? And if they have those relationships, can they usher me in and get me in front of key decision makers? And it's partners who can do that. So in my world, it's outsourced contact center BPO partners that have had a 10-year relationship with this enterprise account that can happily broker an introduction for me. I don't mind giving them 20 points off on a deal. That discount's worth it. I would have never gotten in front of that. It would have taken me a year to prospect that person and get in front of them. Instead, I'm being introduced by a key trusted friend and advisor who they've had for years. So if it's up to me, I would not only hire a direct sales force, but I would also focus in on selling through a channel.
So, Jason, if you do that, and even
Mm-hmm.
if you're very early stage, how does the kind of relationship and sales process map when you have two different partners now in a deal?
So, depend. I mean, that's a great problem to have. right? That means people are clamoring for your stuff. You kind of want to be Switzerland, right? They both should have the same discount level. And frankly, who cares who wins? I have that situation going on right now with a large insurance company. We're selling an HR use case that's built on top of Zendesk, and two very large BPOs are bidding on this humongous project. This has been going on for 16 months. The truth is they're both pitching Zendesk, so I win either way. If you run the channel correctly, you can have multiple partners bidding on the same business using your products or services. And it doesn't matter who wins. You win either way. Now, when I say that, some horses in the horse race pay off better than others. So, for example, in this one deal with this insurance company, I really want company A to win versus company B. And the reason for that is I've already done two deals with company B in America. These are both new partners. I've yet to do my first deal with company A. So that one, even though I'm getting the same amount of dollars, that one's more strategic to me because it'll springboard them to hopefully do deal number two comes easier, deal number three comes even easier. By deal four, they're almost self-sufficient. Lastly, especially to the CEOs who are doing most of the selling themselves, or if you're managing salespeople, I talk about the 5 things you need for a sale. These 3 questions help answer the majority of that slide. Ask your reps, ask yourself if you're doing the selling. I have a sticky note on my PC. Why this? Why us? Why now? Why this? Did you establish a value prop? Why us? Did I differentiate myself against competition or doing nothing? That could be my competition, right? Why us? And why now? Is there any urgency? Can I create urgency? Those are key questions. So some key takeaways. Again, 1 or 2 sales is a hobby. Try and build a repeatable business based on sales. Sales is king. I'd hire salespeople who've worked at a startup prior, who's willing to plow the dirt with their face and keep going. There's a lot of salespeople, veteran salespeople who have bounced around from company to company. They're not the ones you're looking for. It's a distributed world now. I don't know if this is the new normal. I hate that phrase, but if the right VP or head of sales isn't in Cincinnati, look elsewhere. You're running a methodology. It doesn't really matter where they're physically located. I think this is a key point. I have no idea what the sales talent looks like in Ohio or Northern Kentucky. Get big referenceable lighthouse account or accounts. Know those stories backwards and forwards, train on those stories backwards and forwards, make sure everybody's telling those stories in the best light possible. Avoid all those common pitfalls that I went over. Typically and normally, I can't stress enough how important leading sentences with those words, how valuable that is, how disarming that is. Again, you can't probably afford an army of salespeople. Utilize the channel and ask those 3 whys.
Can I do a lightning round of questions?
Yes, please.
Please throw them in the chat, everybody. I'll get us started. So, Jason, I don't know if you remember, there's an old Steve Martin bit where he said, I'm going to tell you how to be a millionaire. And his first step was get $1 million. So, get a big reference lighthouse account, right? So, the most difficult customers to work with and sell to, giant corporations, right, that are set up to not deal with companies of 10 people, right? How do you go from 0 to 1 there? Or what do you think are the key variables or steps?
Yeah, so you need to ask yourself some hard questions on how valuable is this customer to me. I'll use an example at Bluestone Software. This is the 90s. We rewrote the package tracking system for UPS on our middleware. It was amazing. UPS wouldn't let us reference them. So we would tell stories about how we work with a delivery company in big brown trucks. That's how we got around that piece. But the truth is looking back, I would have given it away. I would have built the app for them, given it away for them to be a reference to speak at conferences, to do a webinar, to write a case study, because I know if I have UPS, I'm going to nail FedEx, I'm going to go DHL, everybody, whoever else, right? They put us on the map. So think long and hard about what is the value you can get in return, even if you have to quote unquote give it away. And when I say give it away, maybe you sell it at 10 cents on the dollar, so you're still getting revenue in, but the value that they could bring as a lighthouse account would be greater. And then the other piece to this is from a contracting standpoint, they're going to be an 800-pound gorilla. You're going to have to accept some language there.
All right, so we're on contracts. I had other questions, but right, so you get a contract from a company. They're excited to work with you. They send you their standard, agreement, and it's, oh, you have $20 million of general liability insurance and $10 million of cyber liability, and you're going to assign us every piece of intellectual property that we ever touch, and we're going to pay you in 915 days, and you look at it and you're like, yeah, none of this works. How do you negotiate with a giant corporation?
Well, and you might be better to answer this from your P&G days. If your price point isn't too terribly high, maybe you're selling a proof of concept that's under, let's say, 100K or 50K or something like that. Typically, a lot of large companies have sort of, I don't want to call it a slush fund, but they have how did you buy Slack? How did you buy some other startup companies that aren't as established as us, right? Typically, they have room somewhere to take a chance, again, making somebody a hero, right? Making their mark. Hey, take a chance on us, agree to our term, understand that we're not going to be able to cover you on this. The likelihood that they're going to need the liability from you, that you're going to ruin their business, is very minimal. At the end of the day, a lot of that is just negotiating. And so throw it back on them and say, I can't imagine we're the first startup you've ever worked with in the past. And they'll say, no, we work with this one or that one. Great. How did they handle it? I mean, it's okay to throw up your arms and say, look, I can't agree to all this. We're a small company. Be a partner here. Work with us. I'm giving you a smoking deal, 10 cents on the dollar. Work with us on this.
Okay. All right, so we have a few from the crowd before I monopolize all the time. So when your value proposition is a variable, so say save 30% of your software budget, is that a benefit or a hindrance from an ROI or problem solving stance?
So the first thing I would say is, if they see it as, if they agree with that value prop, that they can save 30% of their budget, you have the makings of a sale there, right? But the trick is to get them to say it's 30%. You're going to the market saying, we can help you save 30% or up to 30% or however you're pitching it. If you can quantify that, they turn around and go, holy cow, my budget is this. You can chop off this much. Just say, all right, I'm just going to take this much for this much saving, right? The only reason people do two things. They either try and make more money or save a ton of money. Nobody's saving their way to millions of dollars, but they're the only two reasons people buy anything, right? So I want to make millions or save millions.
Okay.
So to me, I think it's a good value prop, but the trick is getting them to bite off on it and seeing if you can quantify it early.
Okay. All right. So if you have an enterprise scale solution, right? So say something with lots of modules and complexity. How would you think about like land and expand? So would you try and just get a foot in the door and focus on having them succeed with one module, versus trying to drag in, or actually that biases my question, versus trying to bring in the whole solution?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of KISS, right? That acronym, keep it simple, stupid. So even at Zendesk, people can buy off the web. We very much have a land and expand methodology, right? So bite off on a project that you can kick ass at. Sell that module, have success, then go in and move to this next department or the next feature add-on, and then the next feature add-on. There's nothing wrong with building a strong company brick by brick by brick. I'm a big fan of land and expand. It's a faster sale. It's a faster way to show success, and it's easier to expand because you already have the paperwork done, the hard part of the paperwork done, and you already have a success under your belt. It's much easier to just buy more.
Okay. All right, folks, feel free to throw more questions in. I'll unmute you if I can, but I probably don't know how to do that. But I can certainly have more. A lot of this presupposes you have a pipeline, right? So you talk about a process and repeatable. All of that assumes that you have, leads, right? So you've built a product, you have to find somebody to go sell. You don't have a marketing team, you don't have PR, you don't have a lead funnel, right? So what advice would you give somebody that's like, all right, I got to go find my first couple of customers, right? I got to get up tomorrow morning and go get a deal.
Yeah. So, you know, I guess when you had a vision for your company, you probably had a vision of who your likely buyers would be. Like, what kind of companies would really help put you on the map. And I would be prospecting them and I would find out about their ecosystem, right? And what I mean by that is, like in my world, and I deal with, contact centers. If I want to get into a company, I want to find out who takes their calls. Because if I can't get in directly, I'm going to go in through the partner channel, right? And say, oh, hey, Sitel, you take their calls? Hey, we have you know me from way back when or whatever. Can you help me? Can you broker an intro here? Use LinkedIn, use your network, right? To get introduced to key people. And then at least you have an audience to even make the value to make a value proposition to them to see if they bite off on that. So I would make sort of a wish list who would be the best accounts ever, and I would go after all of them. And it could just be focusing on a specific vertical or horizontal across these kinds of companies.
Okay, so question from the crowd. All right, 2 sentences. The ask is for you to fill in the last word. All right. When it comes to selling something that has never been sold before, make sure that you
Establish a clear value proposition every single time.
okay. And when you say value propositions, I'm going to poke a little deeper before I get to the second sentence. Is that specific to that client? Is it, we used to call this claims a lot in the consumer goods world, right? It makes your teeth 80% whiter. Well, I don't know what that means, but 80% sounds like a big word. How do you think about a value proposition?
Yeah, so it could vary. It's going to vary from not, your mileage may vary, right? It's going to vary from customer to customer. It, it's great to say as a whole, the insurance industry saves 80% by using my services. That's great if you can make a blanket statement like that, but nobody's at that point or you wouldn't be on this call, right? The reality is you need to sort of come up with a hypothesis of a value proposition just based on back of the napkin ROI or some of those other reasons that I stated, and test it out. So you get an audience and go, does this make sense to you? Is that directionally right? Hey, I think we can save you money here. Or hey, if we help you with this area of your business, you can go to market and
Okay.
sell more of this. So I think you need to come up with a hypothesis and then test it across multiple people and multiple organizations and tweak as you go.
Okay. So when you're selling something that has never been sold before, make sure that you do not X. So what's the great pitfall?
God, what's the greatest pitfall? I see a lot of price before value,
Okay.
right? I see a lot of price before value. I see a lot of reps go, they need the price to be at this. And I say, man, we missed an opportunity to really sell value and keep our price points high. So
Okay.
instead, we're making it up by giving them 20% off.
All right. Can you elaborate? Then we got more. So can we elaborate a little bit on kind of when you say partner channel, right? So I
Yeah,
think
so
we said partner a lot in the olden days because we wanted to, make sure that they felt valued. But like, what do you mean when you say setting up a channel or partner?
yeah, so so you have a sales force that sells direct. Typically, you have a sales force that sells direct. I work in tech. They sell direct, so they sell direct to MetLife, John Deere, Procter and Gamble, whoever the customer is. Or I'm selling to Alta Resources, the outsourcer who takes calls on behalf of Procter and Gamble. And so that is selling through distribution or through a partner channel, right? And what's in it for the partner is they get a discount on your products. Their customer becomes more sticky. They see intrinsic value of reselling your services or products because it makes them differentiated from their competition and makes their customer hit certain KPIs. KPIs being key performance indicators like higher customer satisfaction or something like that, or greater sales. So selling through distribution, and then what do we get out of it? We get, yes, we're giving up maybe 20% of the money we would get from the deal, but I wouldn't have otherwise gotten that. I wouldn't have gotten an audience with Procter and Gamble unless I cold called them for 6 months. This person's ushering me into a key decision maker today. That's
Okay.
worth it. So really, it's selling through distribution. We call it a partner channel.
Okay. All right. So you're in the process. You've got a lead. You're working on a deal, and oh boy, we didn't get clear on the process, right? So we pitched something wonderful. Everybody seems happy. What's the next step? I don't know, right? Or some part of the sales process or med pick, right? There's an open box or two, and you think you're about to close it. It stalls. You realize, I should have figured that one out. How do you kind of go back and fill that box out, or the understanding, or address things?
That's the arrow in that one slide from urgency back to value proposition. Another way to look at that is uh, rep got fired. I took over her deals. She had a deal forecasted that was 70% likelihood to close. I called up the prospect, and she told me before she left this was the value proposition. And I said, hey, I just following up on Sheila or whatever her name was. And I understand you're interested in this, this, and this. And they said, nope, we're not. She'd never established the value prop. So I had to start over. And I said, oh, well, you're a publishing company. Here's how we work with other publishing companies. And I established a value proposition. And it started back over at 10%. That arrow is the key piece. When deals go silent, and urgency is not there, it could be a number of reasons. And you need to go back and say, hey, when we first talked and everybody was excited, you were excited about this, this, and this. Is that still the case? Has something changed? And then you stop talking. They're going to tell you either something's changed or no, we backburnered it or whatever. They're going to tell you where you are in the deal. However, the one caveat is, and you were sort of touching on this, John, a lot of times because they don't know who you are and they've never bought this type of product or service before, they don't know how to buy it from you. So they get excited and then it just goes into a black hole. And that's where you got to step up and go, well, normally this is the point where we start to engage on a proof of concept or a ramp up to rolling this out across 3 geos or however you want to get started with a customer. And normally and typically allow you to sort of fake it till you make it. But again, when I say to you, hey, normally this is what happens next, they're sitting there going, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. We can do that.
Okay. All right, here's another. This is not from the crowd, but I see lots of folks that just get trapped, right? They make it through a meeting, they make it through a series of meetings, really excited. And like the next step is always another meeting. Well, let's get back together in a few weeks. We'll find some time in our calendar, right? How do you think about, particularly early on in building a company, or if you haven't done a ton of selling, but you can't afford to hire a professional sales team yet? How do you think about kind of sales as a process and cutting steps out, right? So that, you know, getting to the intuition of like, all right, the next thing they're going to want is to talk about contracts, right? Or a purchase, or right, something like that. So how can I bring it to this meeting? Or how can I send that along with this and cut out one more email back and forth? Because every one of those is an opportunity for a deal to die.
Yeah. So if you've never sold anything before, you don't have a sales process, you have to go along at that pace until you figure it out. And then you can make it repeatable and start to shave off or do multiple things. Hey, while you're working on the contract, can I talk with your technical person to make sure they bite off that we can fit into your .NET infrastructure? Yes, let's do these in tandem, right? Doing things in parallel. People don't think in parallel. People think linear. So doing things in parallel is a key thing there. For people that are a little more established, the reality is if you have a sales process, you're going to see where deals start to get stuck, and that's going to vary by rep, because what a rep will find out is they always forget to ask about the technical influence, or they always forget to do something. Like, they're not just making that mistake on one deal, they're probably making it across many. So a sales leader would recognize that and say, hey, you need to work on this area, be focused on this area. The other thing is just a pet peeve of mine. I get invited to a lot of meetings with no agenda. It drives me crazy. What are we talking about today? I go into Zoom and I go, great, what are we talking about today? So at least I have nothing to prepare, and I have nothing, right? So it's okay to make the next step a meeting, but have a detailed agenda. I want to cover off on technically, can we fit in your environment? Hey, do you have any budget for this? And oh, by the way, who signs the deal? Be as blunt as that if you want to be. It doesn't matter if they say yes and agree to the meeting, they know what they're there to talk about. Too many meetings get set up where it's just, hey, let's meet again and talk for coffee. That's great if we're friends, but I'm trying to actually advance a sale.
Yeah, that's fair. And all right, I'm getting a hard time about the Christmas jacket.
Amazing. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, Bill, you should really see it with the pants and the tie,
He really
and
does have pants and a tie. I've seen
yeah,
it.
right. I can go heavier, but I appreciate that. It did not take any selling. All I had to do was see it. And then I bought one for my best friend. Um, yeah.
So, someone asked about empowering someone to sell on your behalf. That is a more advanced question, right? So when you're running a partner channel, which I've done for 20 years, that's difficult. It's really difficult. You need to have processes in place, training, et cetera, to get them to be even fairly competent on your behalf. The truth is the first sale you do with them, you're doing 95% of the selling. They're doing 5. The second one, you're doing 70, maybe they're doing 30. The third one, maybe it's 50-50. And by 4, the balance starts because they've heard you say it 3 or 4 or 5 times. So it's a process, empowering someone to sell on your behalf. And missing key elements, go back to your value proposition, and go back to your champion, the person you establish that value proposition with, and just ask the question directly.
Okay. All right. Would you ever hire a sales rookie? 2 for the price of 1, in a startup. How would you think about kind of the trade-off of more arms and legs versus, somebody kind of further up the pipeline and experience?
The answer is, in
And
fact, yeah.
how do you know, right? So if you're not a salesperson, how do you know if you're hiring a good one or if you're just hiring somebody who can talk?
Yeah. This is a really hard question. So the answer is, would I ever hire a sales rookie? Yes, absolutely. If somebody wants to plow the dirt with their face, to use the phrase I used earlier, if somebody is willing to do that in a startup environment and grow with the company, so the pitch to them is, hey, we're a startup. We don't have any revenue. We want to go places. We want to monetize. We want to sell to Google. We want to whatever the vision is. If they buy off on that vision, they're going to work hard. They're going to work late. They're going to try and build a company with you, and you're going to give them equity for that. So would I hire a sales rookie? Absolutely. I'm assuming you're talking a kid out of school, right, who hasn't really sold much. Maybe they worked at the local Dairy Queen or something, right? But I would hire those people with a seasoned sales executive who can lead them, right? Otherwise, you're all learning on the job. So I'd only hire the rookies if you had somebody to actually implement a methodology, put a process in place, teach them how to sell. John and we hired a sales rookie at Wilkie, and he turned out to be really, really good.
Well, you made him really, really good.
Thanks.
Best investment ever.
Yeah.
Um,
But your question is a catch-22 there. Who do you hire first? I'd lean more towards the experienced, and then
that's
let them fill out their
experienced
team.
individual contributor who wants to maybe be the sales leader or a sales leader. Because you need like at least a player coach, but you definitely need the player, right?
Yes, they have to. If somebody just wants to be a coach, I don't think you have room on the team for that right now, because at the end of the day, everybody has to, in a startup, everyone has to be rowing the boat until you're at a size where now you can pepper in. This is another key thing I left out. Your first sales VP of hire doesn't have to be Mrs. Right. She just has to be Mrs. Right now. And every place that I worked and monetized went through many iterations of sales leadership. As the company grew, they got more higher level people, more expensive people. That's the natural evolution of an organization.
I think that's fair with every function. All right, and it's 5:07. I got one last question, maybe. Anybody has another one, throw it in here. But all right, so do you hire for sales experience or subject matter experience? So if you're selling in a fairly specialized domain, right? Can you take somebody who's proven they can sell in another one and plug them into that, or should you hire somebody who really knows that business well and hope they can learn how to sell?
Well, it's interesting you say that. I talked earlier about my friend who has a cybersecurity startup in DC. He did that as an A/B test. It was basically two rookies. One person had subject matter domain but had never sold anything. The other one had sold a little bit out of college but didn't know the space. The salesperson won. But I suspect it was because they had they got sales skills along the way and were eager to learn more sales skills. The subject matter person in this particular case went back and decided they didn't want to sell anymore. So it's dicey if you hire the subject matter expert. But again, if that person is Mrs. Right now, that's okay, because maybe you learn something about that marketplace or that domain from them, and then you could always hire sales leadership on top of them.
Okay, so we've run over. You have any parting thoughts? Thank you, Brandon.
The only other thing I'd say is this is a unique time, obviously, with COVID. I went on I think I lead the team with 3 meetings this calendar year, which were done in January and February, face to face. But I've made great numbers via Zoom. Our costs of sales have dropped dramatically because I'm not on planes. The wear and tear on my body is less, right? That actually helps, right? If you have more people setting up meetings via Zoom and you can lower that sort of cost of goods sold, the easier it is to maybe take on that extra salesperson. I do think if you have investors, they want a return on their money. And I'm biased because I'm a salesperson, but sales is king. If I'm bringing in dollars, A, I'm never getting fired. But B, if I'm bringing in money and revenue, the investors are going to be happy. That money covers those warts. He who has the gold makes the rules. And so if you have gold coming in, it can cover warts, product deficiencies, lots of other things. We didn't really talk much about post-selling, and building a success team. When do you build that? Well, you need sales to build a success team, right? So that's always a tricky time. When do you do that? When does the salesperson move on to the next sale and let somebody else handle it? That's part 2.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll drag you back for part 2.
Okay, you got it.
But thank you all very much for joining us. Jason, thank you for making the trip out from Philadelphia. Really
No
appreciate it.
No problem.
And yeah, it has probably been a stressful year. Jason had longer hair than I did.
Yeah. I started this year. I was 6'1", 180 with a full head of hair, and now look at me. So.
Anyway, thank you all. If you need help opening doors, right, that's part of what we're here for. John@Cintrifuse.com. I hope you and your families all have a wonderful, safe, happy holiday season, a great end to 2020, and then finally 2021 is around the door, window. Just thank you. Finally. I think we're ready for it. I know I am. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all. Cheers.
Bye-bye.